So here to report out on average daily attendance and the engagement rate, our Assistant Principal of Student Affairs, Dave Mannon, and Tom Doman, Assistant Principal of Athletics.
Good evening.
Good evening, Board. Tonight we're gonna report out on our average daily attendance for the school year. Last year we saw an increase in overall attendance to 94.3%, which is up from 93.4% in 2015. This year we increased communication regarding attendance and behavioral expectations through a variety of arenas. Our deans did some informal meetings with students. We've held attendance expectation, grade level assemblies. We increased communication through newsletters, social media, and etc. We also started the attendance challenge, which recognized and rewarded students during their lunch periods with the highest attendance rate in a particular month that we chose. Weekly attendance meetings were held with our data processing manager, attendance clerk, myself, and the deans. And we will continue to stress attendance expectations through our grade level assemblies here coming up in August. And we will continue our 2 research-based interventions, the Bulldog Report and our Hope Mentoring Program, as well as revitalizing our Bulldog Buck program. We're going to utilize Hero and go to more of an online format for incentivizing students for doing good things in the building. So those are our attendance initiatives for next year.
And a large chunk of it is that it's drawn some attention this summer is about that additional $300,000 roughly that we're going to be supposedly receiving from the state. A big chunk of that was because of our efforts in the Student Affairs Office and throughout the building by staff to improve average daily attendance. So I just wanted to make sure that recognition was also recognized.
Thank you. Any questions on attendance?
So if you took it was the best year of the 5 years you're reporting, and the 3 years before we were almost identical, about 93.3, so we were up about 1%, which that's about 16 students a day that were in the school, right? Very good.
Good job, Dave.
And again, that's our main focus down in the office, so we'll continue those efforts next year, and we're looking forward to incentivizing our students for being here next year.
You still be doing home visits?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Our next report is our engagement report. We saw a decrease from 2015, which was at 65% to 62% this year. We did break down engagement in all of our extracurriculars through grade levels. Our graduating seniors had an overall engagement percentage of 54%, which was our lowest by grade level, followed by our juniors at 57%. Our lower classmen held 70% and 69%, so there was an increase there in their underclassmen. And so our efforts going forward for this year is to survey those incoming seniors and see where they fall in. You know, what's going on there? Are they not? Do they have jobs, or is it pay to participate or whatnot? We want to get a good feel on where we're at with that. 3 years ago, there was a survey that was sent out, and reviewing some of that data, they expressed interest in additional clubs. So we did that. So we offered art club, ski club, and then we brought back all of our foreign language clubs as well. And so that was an interest from them at that point. So now we have a brand new set of students that are coming in here as upperclassmen. So we want to gauge where they're at with their interests and how we can get them re-engaged into our extracurriculars here at the school.
I had a question, David. We may not have the data, but I mean, typically, do those participation trend down as people advance in years and either lose interest in sports or activities, get more involved?
Sport, athletic-wise, yes. It's more competitive. There's more time commitments, so you do find a little bit less number per. But this senior level is quite a bit lower than some of the other levels, obviously, in the school. And it happens with test scores and everything. You know, it's kind of that dip in the.
More of probably senior year because senior year because you go from having maybe a JV and a sophomore team or 2 freshman team to now 1 team.
Right, and you know when kids are on sophomore teams, they get a pretty highlighted event. They're on the Friday night, Saturday night schedule before varsity games, and then as a junior and senior, obviously that gets a little tighter with the number that can play, and they sometimes specialize. So you may lose a double athlete, 2 athlete to a 1 sport because they're specializing or hoping to advance in college in one sport. So yeah, it's very common.
Looking at the previous data from the class of 2016, just as a class, their engagement level was always lower than the other 3 classes that they were with.
At our freshman family welcome last year at this time, we really promoted engagement, and we did that last night as well, and we saw it from our freshmen last year, 69%. So our effort now is to maintain and enhance that percentage. And we did open a couple clubs last year, so there's a variety of options for our kids, over 30 clubs and activities for them to get involved in, which we're excited to increase those percentages this year. We've met a couple weeks ago with a principal advisory board, and that's a new board that the principal has established this year with students from a variety of classes. And what we heard the most was, yes, there's communication that we're pushing out, but they need the means of how to get to that communication. So our efforts this year is going to be really promoting and modeling how can you get to that communication piece. You know, where is the student bulletin at? How can you follow us on social media? Where can you go to sign up for a club? Where are the meeting times held at? And we started doing that by, there's 2 TVs down in the cafeteria that were donated that will have scrolling event and meeting times on them, as well as our engagement wall where sponsors can now post meeting times and things like that. So that will be an increased effort from our part. Want to report out on sports?
The athletic participation in numbers there, you see the number of students that actually participated in a sport. Number 484 was the number that were just in one particular sport, and then there was 251 in 2 sports, and then 30 students still participating in 3 sports throughout their career. All in total, if you multiply that out, there's 1,130 odd roster positions that were taken by those 765 kids. The percentage was about 48, just under 48%. The year before was about 49. But we have more kids in school, but we have about identically amount that are in sports the last 2 years. Actually, it's the last 3 years, it's almost the same, up very slightly over the 2 years ago. And again, some of our dips in some sports we prepared earlier out the year were some transportation in the fall issues with tennis fell off a little bit girls-wise, and our gymnastics program going through a changeover, having a higher level of competition as far as demands on them and skill levels. So they're starting to turn that around. But I think it's important to notice that we talked about saturation level before, and we'll be completing the report of all the sports costs and how many sports were at their saturation level or close to it. And roughly I was again just having that done for next meeting probably, or this early fall. There's like 16 or 17 out of the 26 programs that are almost fully capacitated, you know, within a few kids here and there. So there really is probably a leveling off we're at, where somewhere we're hosting almost as many kids as we can within 50 or 60 probably.
Any additional questions?
Yeah, I know you make mention of to get notice of the club activities, but there's 232 students only that participated. And how many different clubs do we offer? I mean, that's, to me, is the utilization there is not very big.
So overall, it's roughly 600 students that were not involved in an extracurricular sport or activity.
Yeah, but even the clubs, right? Do you have a roster of how many kids were in clubs? And
so we meet with our club and sponsors once a year, well, twice a year. We do a mid-year meeting, start the year off, then we have a mid-year meeting and an end-year meeting, and in those conversations, we talk about increased engagement. And one thing that we're doing next year is each club is going to have a communication head that I'm going to meet with quarterly next year going forward about how are we pushing out communication to our student body. And that's the piece that was missing this year was, yes, we're pushing out that communication, but again, it was showing our students where do we go to get that information at. Because now it's not just Facebook anymore. It's, you know, the variety of social media that we have access to. It's and then bulletin boards throughout the building, TVs and things like that, but making sure students know where to go, those spots.
does the student have any incentive to be in an extracurricular activity, a club?
I think incentive-wise, it's part of the Bulldog Pride initiative and it's through our character counts tenets that are established here. And so what's the payoff? It could be self-fulfilling through going out in the community and helping at our local senior citizen homes. It could be helping revitalize the forest with our ecology club. So those are the payoffs for our students. And then eventually, obviously, providing more experiences for students, it just makes them more well-rounded, but also it's an opportunity for them to put that on their application for college and things like that as well.
I know we use distance and work. Do we use student involvement in extracurriculars or activities as an incentive for our parking pass list?
Exactly. That is one area where we do, when we put out the parking application, all students list what activities they are in. The more activities that they're involved in, obviously they're here more at the school, and thus they would need a parking space because they're here later or they're here earlier. So that is one area that we do incentivize students.
Also, at the June board meeting, we reported out on the number of students that participated within each club, and that was a little over 1,000 students. It's just of those students, 232 just do activities and are not involved in a combination of sports and activities.
A lot of the athletes are doing both activity and athletics.
So I'm sure the question, and it's going to be asked by the board, or the point that we're working on, is to figure out what we can do differently for the 600, 559, right?
Exactly.
Are you looking at what other high schools are doing to try to increase their engagement, or what type of campaigns or stories?
Yeah, we have a monthly conference meeting with all of our activity assistant principals throughout the conference, and that's a great time. This year we're working hard to put together an activity similar to what sports does. It's an activity leadership day where we pick a variety of our students from an activity, like 10 students, and then they'll come to that activity, get some leadership programming, come back, and then refuel that within their activities on campus here. So that's one thing we do as well. And then we're always constantly looking and sharing ideas back and forth with each other.
Yeah, and athletics-wise, all communities in the Chicagoland area, I think nationwide, are finding they're losing, football numbers are falling lower on the lower levels in every school. Our conference right now is debating on certain schools having even a sophomore level. There's going to be some schools that are going to be hard-pressed to have 2 levels, which is very unusual, but it's starting to impact.
I did see a new feeder for football for us now, right?
Yes, our local feeder program with the Bulldogs is going up and running. They started last spring organizing, and it appears to be off to a really positive and successful numbers.
So when you, as part of your addressing the media, like, there's a, Jerry's question, I looked at the page that has all the clubs and activities doesn't list all the clubs and activities. And some of them, it doesn't list the contact, it says to be determined. So as part of that, we'll be getting that updated so that people know what all the clubs are and who to contact.
Correct. We had some turnover with staff leaving at the end of the school year, so
Sure.
we'll update that with new hires that were just recently completed for the next school year coming here.
The only other thing, Kristen, maybe have somebody look at the numbers. I don't know if we need to update it, but it said there were 463 people in the table. I didn't notice this before until Tom started reading the numbers in one activity, and then it says there were 448 students who participated in one sport. So one of
Because those students could participate in one sport, but they could also be in an extracurricular activity. So that's where that becomes confusing. So that bullet point's just looking at sport participation.
Yeah, but if the sports is 484 and one, the total for sports and clubs can't be 463, can it?
Yes, it
Can't be less.
Well, it could, because you could have some of those students that just participated in one sport also be in 2 or 3 activities, clubs, and so then they would be in the 3+ activity column up above on the chart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we could try to
it's
clarify
confusing.
that
No,
for the
okay,
next
I
one.
got it.
So
I'll
you
push
said,
it then.
you said the June presentation, there was 1,000 in clubs?
1,110.
Okay, so this sentence here, there were 599 students that did not participate in, is a,
So that's just off of rosters, just like it was for athletics. So that's not necessarily exclusively 1,110 students. That could be one student who participated in 5 different activities, and that report's counted 5 times. Because it just breaks it down by, here's the number of students that participated in math team, here's the number of students that participated in spring musical.
Well, statistics aside and your planning aside, I mean, do you think we should have a higher participation rate? I mean, we set a goal and we're not reaching it. I mean,
Well, I
we
think
say
it's-
engagement's important, so is there
Yeah, I think it's,
possibility of
you know, the
increasing
more
it?
is always better as far as, but at some point there is, we mentioned saturation levels and also
Sure.
ability to effectively service those kids when they're there. Sometimes we have too many in the place where they're not actually, you know, maybe getting enough of the, you know, training or whatever. If it's a club, it's a little easier, but,
That's why I was thinking more on the club and the activity side than the sports side, to be
I
honest.
think it changes, each year's is a different year, there's so much different, the classes, that's why their performances and their test scores and their
Okay.
performances on the field are so different every time.
So I have another question, big question. There's trends going on in sports. Lacrosse is becoming big, golf is falling off for millennials. When is a decision made, and golf has a limited amount of roster space, so you're forcing yourself to capacities there that are very small. So when do you make a decision to say, hey, maybe we should, in order to reach a goal here, more participation, where I can probably bring on 25 individuals, girls and boys, maybe 30 lacrosse, versus where you only have 7 players and you have a bunch of other kids who just sit around and don't really get any kind of training whatsoever in golf? When's the decision, and how do you
Well, the
look at it?
lacrosse interest is, I would say, building slowly. There has been some contacts, we've had discussions with some parents and groups. They are currently experimenting with seeing how many kids that they can get to come to informal practices on their own. So this fall, we'll be getting some of that feedback. But there was not nearly enough interest in our surveys from freshmen and from our parents and the groups that came in, from just RB kids to have enough of a club yet, or at least a semi-competitive scrimmage with somebody. So they're hoping, what they call, to have, call the place, the opportunity to have kids come and see how many will start to show up. So we'll be getting data from that this fall, and that will be both for boys and girls. You know, they're gonna try to do it as an open thing. But you're right, they would carry more roster spots, but interest level obviously has to be fairly high, because you gotta at least get enough to have a practice situation, so that's where they're at. And then normally it goes through a club situation for a year or so, and then becomes, you know, the state of Illinois has just moved. They've never had lacrosse as a competitive sport. It is just kind of reached the level where they're going to pursue moving it, but it's been there for like 8 years, not a sport, you know, and they've had trouble getting, but some schools that have done it, you know, they do get larger numbers of kids on their rosters, but we haven't had that number yet tell us that they want that, but it's moving in that direction.
Anything additional? Would that be the conclusion?
That's the conclusion.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, guys, good job.